You ever sat in a room full of people and suddenly, it feels like the storm's raging inside your chest, your heart pounding, your breath tight. But on the outside you're silent. That's silence, that's stillness, that's power. That's strength. Most people don't understand it, but the ones who do, the manipulators, the schemers, the ones who feed off your reaction, they fear it. See? There's something haunting about a person who doesn't flinch, doesn't break, doesn't raise their voice when the world tries to corner them. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they've learned to master what they feel. And let me tell you something, nothing makes a manipulator more nervous than a person who refuses to play their game. They want you loud. They want you desperate. They want you so reactive that you lose control. And the moment you do, they win. But when you stay calm, when you speak slow, when your eyes say, "I see through you," but your mouth stays quiet, that shakes them. It throws off their script, because manipulation only works when you hand them the pen. Staying calm. That's you snatching the pen back and writing your own damn story. They come at you with words meant to sting, gestures meant to provoke, silence meant to punish. They study your reactions like a predator tracks its prey. They thrive on your emotional disarray, hoping you'll flinch, cry, shout, anything to make you feel unstable so they can step in and call themselves the stable one. But what happens when you don't give them what they expect? What happens when you don't rise to the bait? That's when the tide begins to turn. Because they are not prepared for your calm. They're not prepared for the silence between your breaths, and the unwavering look in your eyes that says, "I've seen this before." Calmness is not a passive state, it is an active form of self-mastery. It is learned in the furnace of suffering, in the echo of betrayal, in the silence of lonely nights where your only companion was your thoughts. When you've survived storms that no one saw, you learn to make your heartbeat your anchor. Manipulative people can't wrap their heads around this. They're so used to people unraveling under pressure that they mistake calmness for detachment, for weakness. But what they're witnessing is discipline. Years of battles that taught you how not to lose yourself, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. They want you messy. They want you emotional. They want you swinging wild so they can cry foul and shift the blame. They want you spiraling so they can look grounded in comparison. But when you stay calm, you rob them of the stage. You pull the plug on their performance. Your calmness strips away their illusions and makes their chaos look even louder, even more erratic. You become the mirror, and suddenly, they can see themselves clearly, and they don't like what's looking back, because it's never been about you losing control. It's always been about them controlling the outcome. Staying calm is not about being unaffected. It's about being unmoved by manipulation. It's about standing so firmly in your truth that no tactic, no guilt trip, no backhanded compliment can shake you. It's about choosing not to explain yourself when someone isn't listening to understand. It's about valuing your peace so deeply that you won't trade it just to prove a point to someone who already made up their mind. That calmness sends a message they can't decode. It tells them you're no longer within reach. And nothing is more terrifying to a manipulator than losing access to your energy. They test your boundaries in subtle ways. A comment here. A contradiction there. A sudden shift in tone. They're probing for a crack. But when your demeanor stays steady, when your energy remains clean and unwavering, their manipulation starts to backfire. They look for emotional leverage and find none. They seek control and meet a wall of clarity. Calmness doesn't just defend you. It reverses the pressure. It's a silent confrontation they didn't see coming. And suddenly, their games feel exposed. Suddenly, they're the ones on edge. Most people react out of emotion. But you've learned the strength of waiting. You've learned that breathing slowly while chaos brews around you is not cowardice. It's wisdom. You've understood that you don't have to match anyone's dysfunction just to feel seen. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. Your calmness becomes the loudest thing in the room. It vibrates with authority, and it unsettles those who built their confidence on your confusion. Now they're the ones left wondering what comes next. This calmness, this composure, it's forged through trials. It's not natural, it's earned. Every moment you could have lashed out but didn't, every insult you swallowed because you chose peace over conflict, every trap you avoided by choosing stillness, those were victories. And manipulators hate people who win battles they can't even see. Your calmness is a language they don't speak. They try to provoke you in English, and you respond in silence. And that silence is deafening. It tells them they're no longer important enough to disturb your spirit. You are no longer the person who needs to react to be recognized. You are the person who watches, who listens, who decides if and when to speak. And even when you do, your words are measured, precise, cutting through the nonsense like a blade through fog. Manipulators panic in that presence. They can't control someone who's already conquered themselves. Your calmness breaks the illusion that they ever had the upper hand. There's a kind of silence that doesn't beg to be understood, that doesn't seek validation, that doesn't need applause or recognition. It just is, and in that stillness lies a force so potent, so commanding, that it unsettles those who operate through noise, confusion, and manipulation. Silence makes manipulative people nervous because it steals the spotlight they crave. It stops the performance. It ends the illusion that they are in control. When you choose silence, you choose power without performance. You show them that you no longer need to argue to prove your worth. You've evolved beyond their games. Manipulators often rely on the assumption that you will explain yourself endlessly, that you will defend your name, your choices, your truth. But silence breaks that expectation like a hammer to glass. It is the refusal to play their game, the quiet declaration that says, "I know who I am, and I don't owe you a single word." That terrifies them, because when you don't respond, they can't twist your words. When you don't engage, they can't manipulate your emotion. Your silence becomes a boundary, a line they cannot cross, no matter how hard they try to provoke you. The strength of silence is not passive. It's deliberate. It's not weakness, it's restraint. It's looking someone dead in the eye as they try to provoke you and choosing peace over pettiness. It's understanding that not everything deserves your energy. And that scares manipulators because their power is rooted in your reaction. They want you to panic, to raise your voice, to feel cornered. But when you say nothing, when you remain still, when you offer no fuel to their fire, they burn out faster than they expected. You rob them of control simply by staying still. Silence forces them to sit with themselves. Without your reaction to mask their discomfort, they have no distraction from their own reflection. Your stillness becomes a mirror. And that mirror doesn't lie. They begin to see the weight of their words without your defense. They begin to realize that the manipulation isn't working. Silence strips away the noise, and in that silence, truth echoes louder. The truth they tried to bury, twist, or hide becomes undeniable. And nothing frightens a manipulative person more than the truth they can no longer run from. People often confuse loudness with strength, but the strongest voices are often the ones that don't speak unless it's necessary. Manipulators are used to people who are easy to rattle, easy to provoke. But silence shows them you're not just unbothered, you're unreachable. Your silence says, "I've outgrown this conversation." It tells them that their presence is no longer significant enough to stir you, that they've lost their influence over your spirit. And once they realize they can't access your emotional response anymore, they begin to lose their grip entirely. Silence creates space, space for clarity, space for healing, space for your soul to breathe. Manipulators hate that space because it means they no longer occupy your mind. They thrive in confusion, but silence invites order. They try to create urgency, but silence breeds patience. They thrive when you speak emotionally, but silence makes them sit in their own noise. It becomes the most disarming tool you have. Not because it lacks words, but because it holds meaning. Because it carries with it a boundary that cannot be manipulated. The most powerful decisions are often made in silence. The moment you walk away, the moment you stop replying, the moment you decide that your peace is more important than being understood by someone who never cared to understand you anyway. And that decision doesn't come with fireworks or grand speeches. It comes in quiet moments. It comes in the stillness of self-respect. And that stillness screams louder than anything they've ever said to break you. That's why they fear it. Because it means they've lost access to the one thing they were trying to control: you. Silence isn't the absence of response. It's the presence of wisdom. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows that their value isn't up for debate. It's the understanding that some battles aren't worth fighting, and some people aren't worth answering. Silence isn't empty. It's full of everything you've learned. Every betrayal, every lesson, every moment you rose from the ashes. And when you sit in that silence, you radiate a kind of strength that can't be faked. That's why manipulators retreat when you stop speaking. Because in your silence, you become undeniable. Stillness has a way of making the truth surface. When everything around you is chaotic, noisy, and spinning out of control, stillness becomes a threat to those who are trying to distract, deflect, or deceive. Manipulative people hate stillness because it doesn't give them anywhere to hide. It doesn't offer them a curtain to pull closed, or a spotlight to step into. Stillness pauses the show, and in that pause, the script they've rehearsed begins to fall apart. They are forced to stand without distractions, without chaos, without smoke and mirrors, and what's left is their own behavior staring back at them. Stillness makes people confront themselves. The longer you stay quiet, the longer they have to sit in the mess they made. When you choose not to respond in the moment, when you choose not to defend or deflect, you shine a quiet light on their actions. It's uncomfortable. It's piercing. It creates a silence that demands honesty, not the kind they speak, but the kind they feel deep in their gut. They start replaying their own words. Not because you questioned them, but because your stillness did. That's how powerful it is. It doesn't beg for truth. It commands it. When you're still, you're not escaping. You're not running from confrontation. You're inviting it to meet you on your terms. You're choosing presence over panic. That unnerves the manipulator, because they've counted on you flinching, scrambling, reacting out of fear or guilt. But stillness removes the power of their timing. It says, I won't be rushed. I won't be swayed. I won't be fooled. It makes them realize they're no longer controlling the tempo. And when they lose control of the rhythm, their words start to fall flat. Their tactics become obvious. Their story starts to crumble. Stillness slows down the game. It removes the fog. In stillness, you can see the details they wanted you to miss. The inconsistencies, the contradictions, the emotional traps carefully placed like landmines. But more than that, stillness makes them aware of those cracks too. Manipulators don't want to be seen clearly. They rely on confusion and impulsive emotion to keep their lies intact. But when you refuse to move, when you refuse to react, their manipulation is exposed under the weight of your silence. Your stillness becomes the lens through which their behavior is magnified. Stillness is not about being passive. It's about choosing clarity over chaos. It's the bold decision to let the truth rise instead of forcing it out. It's the strength to let their words echo into the space you've made by not reacting. And in that echo, they start to hear themselves. They hear how twisted the narrative has become. They hear the weight of their manipulation without your voice covering it up. That realization doesn't come when you're arguing or shouting. It comes when you're still. That's when the truth becomes too loud to ignore. Manipulators feel safe in reaction. That's why they push you to speak, to argue, to explain, because the more you talk, the more they twist. But stillness gives them no room to maneuver. No loopholes, no emotional slips to exploit. Just silence and time, two things they can't control. Time spent in stillness is time spent unraveling their facade. They begin to see that they've lost the thread of their own manipulation, that you're no longer tangled in it. That shift in power happens quietly. It doesn't announce itself, but it changes everything. You don't need to point fingers when your stillness is already doing the work. You don't need to prove anything when the facts are settling like dust in the quiet room. Your lack of reaction becomes the most honest mirror they've ever faced. And while they may try to blame, distract, or guilt their way out of it, stillness offers no place to run. It freezes the moment. It magnifies the discomfort. It holds them accountable without a single word, without a single raised voice, and that level of power terrifies them. Stillness creates a space where only the truth can survive. Not their version of the truth, not your emotions clouding your judgment, but the raw, unfiltered reality of what has been said and done. And in that space, they can no longer pretend. They can no longer hide behind manipulation or misdirection. The stillness becomes a silent witness, and witnesses don't lie. That's why they squirm under your silence. That's why they shift in discomfort when you stop chasing validation. Because they know what you know, and they know you've seen enough to never be fooled again. Composure doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need to prove itself. Composure is the quiet authority that enters the room before you speak and lingers long after you've gone. It's the stillness in your eyes, the steadiness in your tone, the unshaken rhythm of your breath while chaos circles around you. Manipulative people don't know what to do with that kind of energy. They expect you to unravel. They expect your voice to crack, your hands to tremble, your words to stumble. But when you show up with composure, you flip their entire strategy on its head. They rely on you falling apart to hold themselves together. There's an elegance in composure that cuts deeper than any insult or retaliation ever could. It's the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. Peace, dignity, self-worth. When you remain composed, you strip manipulative people of the power they crave. You don't flinch at their games. You don't feed their drama. You don't get swept up in their emotional bait. And that unnerves them. Because their whole agenda is to draw you into chaos, and when you stay rooted, calm, and measured, you become a fortress they can't penetrate. Composure doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've mastered the art of not letting others weaponize what you feel. It's emotional intelligence wrapped in restraint. It's knowing your worth so deeply that you won't let a manipulative person shake your foundation. You see what they're doing, you feel what they're trying to stir up in you, but you don't hand them the keys to your emotional home. You guard your space with grace, and that kind of composure becomes a language. A silent message that says, "I see through you, and I refuse to be moved by you." They try to confuse composure with apathy, but they're wrong. Composure is not lack of care. It's care with boundaries. It's love with wisdom. It's strength wearing patience like armor. Manipulators want you loud and frantic, because then they can call you unstable. They want you defensive, so they can label you irrational. But when you are composed, they can't twist your presence into something shameful. They are left with their own reflection, and no one to blame. That terrifies them, because they can't control someone who chooses their words like a sword, and stands behind them with unshakable peace. You take control of every room you enter when you are composed. You own your silence. You dictate the tone of the conversation. People begin to adjust to your pace, not the other way around. Manipulative individuals hate that shift because they've built their influence on speed. Fast emotions, fast guilt, fast confusion. But composure slows everything down. It creates discomfort for those who thrive in emotional chaos. It makes them confront their own energy because yours is too steady to manipulate. Your peace becomes louder than their pressure. Composure is earned. It doesn't come from avoiding pain but from walking through it and deciding not to let it define you. It comes from breaking down in private and standing tall in public. From knowing you've been shattered before and refusing to let anyone break you again. Manipulators don't expect resilience. They expect weakness disguised as reaction. But when they see that you've built strength out of suffering, they can't find the cracks to exploit. You've turned your past into power, and your composure is proof of the battle you already won. You don't chase understanding when you are composed. You don't beg to be seen clearly. You let the truth speak for itself, and you carry yourself in a way that commands respect without ever asking for it. That's the language of true power, silent, focused, intentional. Manipulators try to destabilize you with confusion, but composure is clarity. They try to trigger you with false urgency, but composure is timeless. They try to guilt you into reaction, but composure is freedom. And that freedom threatens everything they've tried to hold over you. The most powerful thing you can do in the face of manipulation is to remain composed. To stay unbothered, not because you don't care, but because you've learned that reacting gives away your power. You don't let people pull you out of alignment. You don't let them disrupt your emotional center. Instead, you become the example of what it means to hold yourself with strength, with dignity, with unwavering self-control. That's what true power looks like. It's not loud, it's not forceful, it's composed. And that presence alone makes the manipulator lose the game they thought they'd already won. Calm is not just a mood, it's a shield. In a world that constantly tries to pull you into noise, confusion, and emotional warfare, calm becomes your quiet rebellion. Manipulative people hate that shield because it blocks their usual entry points. They can't guilt you when you don't flinch. They can't bait you into an argument when you don't respond. They can't twist your words when you've chosen not to speak. Calmness protects something sacred inside you. Your peace. And when your peace is intact, their control over you slips through their fingers like sand. Peace doesn't come from the absence of chaos. It comes from the decision not to let chaos inside you. You could be surrounded by conflict, by passive-aggressive jabs, by emotional traps carefully set with a smile. But if you remain calm, they can't touch what matters most. They want you angry. They want you hurt. They want you loud. Because when you're loud, they can twist it. But when you're calm, they're left with nothing but their own echo. They're left to sit in the silence you created by not reacting. That silence becomes a boundary. And boundaries built on calm are harder to break than walls built on anger. Calm is your anchor when manipulation tries to drown you. It's what keeps you rooted when someone's trying to shake your reality. Gaslighting, guilt-tripping, emotional blackmail. They all lose power when you refuse to be emotionally hijacked. Your calm says, "I see you, but I choose me." It's the moment you realize that not every accusation deserves your defense, not every attack deserves your presence, and not every manipulative tactic deserves your attention. When you stay calm, you're telling them they no longer control your emotional climate. When you protect your peace, you protect your clarity. Manipulative people thrive when you're confused, when your emotions blur the facts, when your heart overpowers your logic. But calmness clears the fog. It helps you see the patterns, the repeated cycles, the moments they twisted the narrative and made you question your worth. Calm allows you to step outside of the storm and watch it from a distance. And from that distance, you can finally see the truth, that their chaos was never about you. It was about their need to dominate the space you were meant to own. There is strength in choosing calm over conflict. It's not about surrendering the fight. It's about choosing which battles are worth your energy. Peace becomes your standard. Not because life is soft, but because you've seen what it costs to live in constant defense mode. You've paid the price of reacting to every insult, every manipulation, every twist of the tongue. And now, you've chosen differently. You've chosen calm, not because you don't feel deeply, but because you've learned that your peace is too precious to be risked for someone who feeds off your disturbance. Calm is discipline. It's choosing to respond after you've thought, not while you're burning inside. It's giving yourself space to breathe, to reflect, to heal in real time. It's knowing that reacting immediately often hands your power to the one who wants it least to serve you, and manipulative people hate that kind of discipline. They hate the long pause. They hate the steady tone. Because it means you're thinking clearly. It means you're no longer operating from wounded emotion. It means you've reclaimed your control. And people who want to manipulate you can't stand when you've reclaimed what they've been trying to steal. When you're calm, you start to hear your intuition again. You hear the inner voice that was once drowned out by their loudness, their control, their guilt trips. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to choose yourself more. And choosing yourself is the greatest disruption to someone who only felt powerful when you were lost in self-doubt. Calm creates a sacred space inside you that they can't touch. A place where your self-worth is built brick by brick through moments of restraint, not reaction. And that place becomes your home, your sanctuary, your fortress. People may misinterpret your calm as indifference, but that's only because they've never seen someone protect their peace so fiercely. They don't realize the strength it takes to stay silent when you could destroy someone with a sentence. They don't understand the power it takes to walk away when everything in you wants to scream. But you understand. You know the cost of giving your energy to someone who won't honor it. And so you remain calm. You hold your peace like a treasure, because you know what it costs to earn it. You don't trade it for chaos anymore. You don't surrender it to anyone who hasn't earned access to your soul.